Live.
Dun, dun, dun.
Setting up your webinar. Hold on.
I'll moderate the questions too, Bill, and weave them in.
Okay.
All right, you're on.
And we have a recording button. Woohoo! Touchdown. Liftoff. Good morning, Vietnam, or the note investing world, as the case may be. After much trial and tribulation, I am very honored and pleasured to be speaking to you this morning. My name is Bill Griesmer. I'm a note investor. I'm a student and friend of Scott Carson, who is the normal host of this show. It's my pleasure to introduce to you here Gail Villanueva. She's a note investor with us also from the WCN Crew. Say good morning here, Gail.
Good morning. Sorry about that feedback.
Oh, that's okay. Things happen in life. You just roll with it. That's probably one of the lessons that we'll talk about with here sometime today.
Yes.
So Gail and I were talking to each other yesterday about what we were going to talk about today. We thought we would start with some positive things about the note business, things that we like, things that drew us to it. We might get into a little bit how we started, but I know, at least for me, one of the most positive things that I can think of about the note investing, a big reason why I wanted to try this route of real estate investing versus others, is that you really have the opportunity to be a part of and execute a win-win scenario. So what I mean by that is, if you buy a house and it's maybe a borrower that had hard times, that had something bad happen in their life, when you are the bank, it gives you a lot of control and a lot of say-so over what's going to happen there. Right. And when things work out well, it doesn't always happen this way, but when things work out well, there really is an opportunity for a win-win scenario. Mm-hmm. You can come out of a situation in a business decision like that where you buy a note, and if you're able to either reinstate the note or you're able to modify the note, you can really end up with a happy borrower, someone that is truly grateful for your services and someone that is really happy to be staying in their house. This is something I've seen online by a number of my friends. I believe it was Chad Erbschot posted something just the other day, this handwritten note from this borrower that he had. And he was able to execute a strategy to try to keep this borrower in her house. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you can actually make a good, healthy return doing this. Right. Versus I think a lot of other real estate investing sometimes, and I haven't done a lot of it since I focused on notes, but it's very easy to look at other real estate investing sometimes as a zero-sum game where I win, you lose, or vice versa. That's not always the case in notes. I really do like the fact that you can positively help someone's lives at the same time that you can earn a return for yourself and a return for your investor. Gail, your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the most gratifying things, is to be able to help people because you now control the paper on it. In some cases, a lot of cases, people don't want to lose their home. So we have the option and the ability to go in there and try to modify or whatever. But there's also occasion where folks just don't want to, for whatever reason. They're not able to, or they want to move in with family. They got head over themselves or something. So we give them the opportunity to bow out gracefully and work something out. And in my business model, I don't take their credit. I want to try to keep them in this as intact as possible. But you are absolutely right on that, Bill.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Another thing that I really like about note investing, a couple years ago, I was a landlord for a very short period of time. And my brother and sister and I had two houses. My father passed away and we decided to rent them out. Mm-hmm. What could go wrong, right?
Well, I can tell you what could go wrong. I have tenants right now. Yeah, I've got I still have 12 doors in my portfolio, so I could tell you how many things can go wrong. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the point is, we didn't do it for long, just under 2 years. And since neither my brother nor sister nor I, none of us really lived close to where the houses were, we did decide to hire a management company. And I thought that would kind of make it a completely no muss, no fuss. And boy, that just was not the case. Part of it was the location. This was up in Northeast Ohio where it snows quite a bit. So, we ended up paying a lot extra for snow removal. I don't know for sure if we had to do that, but on the other hand, the driveway had a very steep descent onto a busy road, so I didn't want the renters sliding down a really steep, icy driveway.
Right.
And then, but just even the management company, for example, I found out from the neighbor that one of the people had a dog. So I sent the management company to talk with them about it. And somehow I got a phone call a couple days later from the renter that the management company had kicked him out. And I had to go back and kind of fix the situation. And I had to say, look, we're going to work something out. Because in the midst of all that, I was negotiating to sell the houses. And if I was to, try to sell the house, it had more value with the renter in it. So my point is, landlording is far from passive income. Even if you use a management company, it's really not passive income. However, once you get a note to a performing stage, I can't say it's no activity or effort, but it is the closest thing to passive income that a lot of times people are going to find. I do have like a couple performing notes, and it really is. It's just money that shows up. I have one that just does show up in my mailbox, so I do have to go out and get it. But the other one is just direct deposit. It goes straight into my bank account. So especially if you're buying non-performing notes, you can need to work that. That does take some effort. But once you get to the point where a note is performing, there's not a lot of activity to it. Right, Gail?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I have a couple of really horror stories too on being a landlord, which is one of the reasons I got out of doing the hard asset, as we call it in real estate. We have hurricanes here in Central Florida, and I was getting ready to go on vacation overseas to Europe, and ended up, long and short of it, I called all of my tenants. We're self-managing some of our units, and said, hey, I'm going out of the country, no problem. Well, I kept an international calling plan just in case. I get a call from one of the tenants. We're about 4 or 5 days into the trip, and she goes, the roof's leaking. This was after Hurricane Matthew, and we got nailed pretty hard with Matthew. I said, how long's it been leaking? She goes, oh, a couple of weeks. I said, so when I was still in the U.S.? And she goes, yeah. So I start calling around for roofers. I have roofers on my staff, or not my staff, but on my team. And they're like, Gail, I can't, we're kind of busy right now. So it ended up that they went out to just kind of mitigate it. And I was just like, they can be, tenants, toilets, and trash is what they talk about. And it can be a nightmare. So the note business avoids all of that unless we take it back for whatever reason. You're right.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. You are exactly correct. Another thing I like about the note business is there's just a very high degree of camaraderie. You really meet and work with a lot of interesting people. Scott Carson, he has a very fascinating background. Wayne Snell, the situation in the background that he came from, working just a very busy, very stressful corporate job. Even you yourself, Gail, with a background as literally a rocket scientist. Me as a physical therapist, I rehab people, and now I'm rehabbing notes and homes, Yeah. You can really meet some interesting people. And furthermore, people are really very likely to help you.
Yes.
There's not a lot of sense of, well, I'm secretive and I'm not going to tell you anything, and, go away, shoo away. I'm not giving you anything to try to work with. There's only, pretty much every note investor that I've ever talked to, they're, pretty friendly, willing to talk with you, might give you some advice here and there. One of the biggest things I get is, please let me know if I can help you. And that, spirit, that attitude, it really carries through that je ne sais quoi, my wife will be impressed. I'm throwing that in there.
Nice.
But anyway, Gail, that's one of the things that I like about note investing. How about you?
I agree. For example, this morning we called Miss Katie Moten. Katie, help! We're trying to get on. And she jumped right on it. And we got to give big kudos to her for helping us out this morning with the technology. But I found that if I come across a unique situation or something I'm still questioning as far as running the note business, everybody's just a phone call away. Different time zones sometimes, but we're all here to help. And I just love that about us.
Yeah. Exactly. I agree 100%. And another thing that even just last night, I had the pleasure to speak at a real estate meeting here, the RIA, here in Columbus, Ohio. Had a really good turnout, probably 100 people, 150 people.
Wow.
And Vina Jones-Cox, she's brilliant. I love learning from her. But she was talking about wholesaling. And, she mentioned this last night. I've heard her speak a number of times before. With wholesaling, for example, you're going to want to go and look out at a number of homes before you find one that really will work for what it is you're trying to do.
Right.
You don't really have to do that as much with note investing. A lot of times, many note investors can make an income, can make a return on a property that they never even actually set foot inside, never looked at it. Generally it is by far best practice to hire someone to go out and take a look at it and make sure you're getting eyes on the property. But it's a lot of the work can be done at home, whether you're looking at a spreadsheet, a type of what we call a tape in the note investing business. Or whether you're, finding realtors to call or, ordering BPOs from a title company, you kind of end up using the same couple of vendors, but then it's a lot more practice to it. It's a lot more, I hesitate to say checklist because every note is a little bit different. And especially if you don't have backup there or a team there. But my point is, you don't have to go out, leave your home all the time to be doing a lot of this work. So that's another thing I like, Gail. Have you found the same?
I have. And working with wholesalers, coming from a rehab background and also as a realtor, we deal with fair market value when we're dealing with notes. And they're dealing with after repair value. So you segued and mentioned it a little bit there. We can actually help wholesalers. Because if we have something in our inventory, we could go nationwide to put it out to a RIA and say, hey, look, I've got this property. I'm a note investor. I will even be the hard money lender on that side while you do the rehab if you want and work it out something like that because inventory is very tight. I worked intimately a lot with wholesalers being a rehabber. And if we can provide them inventory, they're going to be happy with it. And in often cases, we had a different calculation altogether when we dealt with our after repair values. But usually there's enough for everybody and enough to go around so that it's volume for us. It's not so much for them. If I was doing a rehab every month, once a month, that's 12. Well, we can do 12 notes, far greater than in a year. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So at the same time here, so as we've talked about, those are some positive things about the note business. Mm-hmm. At the same time, when Gail and I were talking and planning this out, we don't want to pretend like everything is sunshine and rainbows, as the great Rocky Balboa once said.
Right.
There are some difficult things that some people could consider negative about the note in business. This is one of the biggest ones I get from other people right off the bat is, sometimes you might have to foreclose, sometimes people might have to leave their homes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the case. And, that's always kind of a option of last resort. I never try to go personally. I'd never do, although it is a legitimate exit strategy for people to have. But sometimes, as a last resort, if a borrower just either will not pay, they will not work with you, or they just absolutely cannot afford a home, or they've just moved on with their life, or there could be a whole host of reasons. Sometimes you might have to foreclose. And some of my friends have asked me about that. How does that make you feel? I can't say it makes me feel great, but even everybody has stuff that goes wrong in their lives. People lose jobs, for example. And especially, if we buy a non-performing note, a lot of times, sometimes they might be there for up to a year, completely rent-free with no payment or anything. Depending on the house, that might be worth, I don't know, $6,000, $10,000. So they've lived completely free someplace for a year.
Right.
That's worth something. It's not like we're taking everything and leaving them with nothing. And then a lot of times we'll even offer something like a cash for keys, which gives them at least a little bit of money that they can go out and either rent an apartment or rent another house or what have you. I just don't think it's fair to assume that, if someone bought a house and even if they paid on it for a couple years, if you don't continue to pay, there's nothing in the world that I don't think morally or ethically that says you should be able to continue to stay in that house forever, just rent free. So anyway, I'm not trying to just, rationalize or justify it, but that is a way that I look at it, Gail. How about you?
Well, I have a motto: if you don't pay, you don't stay. And, nobody should have to. I mean, tenants should expect that. But, you're talking about foreclosing and having to disrupt people's lives. Well, in real estate, that happens too. So it's not just inclusive to the note business where you'll have folks that run into hard times and have to sell their house, or you get foreclosed on either as owning the paper, or you get closed upon, and then someone has to deal with getting the house sold. So I've seen it both ways. I've worked short sales, I've worked foreclosures, auctions. There's a lot of different things that happen. So you're right with that feeling of the foreclosure, but I don't like to be backed into a corner. So if somebody's not paying me, the options are let them stay for free, which I can't and shouldn't. Or you just go ahead and let them go ahead and get on with their lives. And I prefer the latter if it knows we're at a point of no return where they can't stay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, another thing about the note business, and although I think this is true of a lot of real estate investing in general right now, the last several years, the economy and the real estate business especially has really been improved significantly. So finding inventory for non-performing notes, it is, getting harder and harder to do all the time. A couple years ago, when I was first getting into this, I heard that, there's going to be this big tsunami of non-performing notes, and that may be the case. You still see sales from, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, where they've started to sell off some of their non-performing notes. But finding inventory can be difficult. It can take a lot of legwork. For example, trying to buy from banks, it can be done, certainly. Joe Bayarena and Jamie Kubiak, they proved it. Way to go, guys. That was a heck of a deal you had last year. But they'll even tell you it took a lot of homework for them to get there. As far as I'm concerned, they earned it with all the effort they put into it. But it can take a lot of legwork to find inventory. You can find the low-hanging fruit Scott's talked about on the online exchanges and such. Can be harder to find really good deals there sometimes. So just in general, note investors, we do have to look around for inventory sometimes, just the way your landlords do or your fix and flippers do.
Yeah, you're right with that. You and I both specialize in notes secured by real estate. And, they have notes, that are on property, boats, RVs, things that move. And you and I think both agree that we didn't really want to pursue that. So there are other types of notes that are available. But when you get down to the real estate notes, because we're dealing with such a high dollar value of an asset, both you and I are very diligent on our due diligence. And we really get down into the weeds and look and make sure that it's going to be a solid deal. Because you and I both get tapes. We get hundreds and hundreds of assets on there. But on the front end, it looks like, oh, wow, I've got hundreds of assets, and I've talked to an investor just the other day. And I said, I'm going through a tape right now. It's got about 650 assets on it. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. He thought, jackpot. But I explained to him, out of those, I may get 10 or 15, maybe 20 that I want to go ahead and put bids on.
Right.
Because of the fact that we really are very, go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Both you and I do, because maybe a little bit too much, just to make sure that we get good, solid deals to invest in. Yes.
Yeah. So then another thing I hear from, and this isn't just a note business, this is a lot of entrepreneurs. There's actually running the business of whatever you're doing, the day-to-day aspects of note investing, and then there's running the business. Making sure your paperwork is done properly, making sure your accounting is done properly, making sure, the bills get paid, that type of thing. Very, very important. They really are in some ways two different things. And this kind of depends on the investor. There's some investors that do really, really well with that. But I hear from a lot of folks that, bookkeeping especially really trips them up. That's something that's most people really don't enjoy doing. I know I don't. I make myself do it. And this year I'm learning QuickBooks. But, the whole business administration aspect of being an entrepreneur can be very challenging. That's been my experience anyway, Gail.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I've started to outsource some things. I outsourced my marketing. You and I were joking about my technological acumen. It's non-existent, by the way, if anybody's wondering. And also the fact that I had outsourced my bookkeeping and accounting, because there's certain things I can learn. And I mean, everybody can learn everything. But if you want to scale, that's when you have to start looking at what can you have other folks take over for you, even if it's hiring a virtual assistant. Because you're right, there are two different aspects to this. You have the what would you consider the internal and the infrastructure, and then you have the business side of everything, where you have to go and find the assets and market and work with people and network and all that other. So two different sides of it. And then once you get back an asset, because we can anticipate about half the time we're going to foreclose, unfortunately. It's just a general rule of thumb. So what do you do at that point? Because then you have to have an exit strategy for those. So you have to always look at that. But, getting into the minutia of, do I want to worry about doing the monthly bank reconciliation? Do I want to try to learn the social media side when it doesn't come easy to me? I'm getting older, so it doesn't come as easy as it once did. So yeah, you're right. The running of the business is a huge part in making sure that you're successful in that regard.
Well, just remember, Gail and audience, this goes for everybody. You don't stop moving because you get old. You get old because you stop moving.
Moving, yes.
Okay. A lot of wisdom in that. I learned that at a course a couple of years ago, and that just, it really struck a chord with me. I've told that to my patients, and even on days I really don't want to go to the gym, I think of that and a couple of other things to try to get me going. So, and then lastly, there, as in with any new activity that you're doing, there can be a steep learning curve. This business, it's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple. The concepts are simple. Most people are aware that, if you're buying something for half price, well, it's probably a pretty good job or a pretty good deal. Right. But it's not easy in the sense that you need to really make sure that everything is how you thought it was. So, Gail, that ties right into what you were talking about just a few minutes ago, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, as we often will say, inside the note business. There's a lot of moving parts with the note business. There's a lot of things that you have to be aware of, and you always have to, it's like chess a little bit. You have to kind of think move ahead. You don't want to overanalyze things, but you always want to have some sort of exit strategy with that. But it's a unique business. I'm lucky I come from a pretty solid real estate background, except throw that away when you're talking about the note side. I mean, some of it, yeah, you can play on it. And my network on both sides has been exceptional. But yeah, you're right with that, Bill.
Yeah. So, and then moving on here, between Gail and I, we came up with some of the most impactful things that we have learned, some of the most influential lessons that we have picked up. Think of this as words for the wise, Really, the first thing right off the top of my head was the old President Reagan, trust but verify.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay to trust somebody, but you will be well served by just taking a little bit, and even if it costs you some money, just verify things. And that's almost everything, frankly. That's verifying, that a house is where they said it should be. That's double checking the value of a house. That's even double checking that, taxes are, even if they say, well, they owe $2,000, well, just double check it's $2,000 and it's not $4,000. Double check other note investors, what they tell you. Sometimes people, even if they truly mean well, they might not have a great understanding of something themselves, and they might inadvertently give you the wrong information. Right. But even in terms of your teachers, people that teach, note investing or real estate investing, not everybody's going to learn from everybody equally. For whatever reason, some people just click with some teachers and not others. So just in general, for a whole host of reasons and scenarios, just try to trust what you're told, but also verify, and don't take anything at face value. I had a guy just out of the blue, just because what I do every day, and I've been really putting myself out there, Derek, called and talked to me last week and was just asking me some general questions about note investing. And, he was asking me, and he, partway through the conversation, he said he's spoken with some other people, and what I was telling him really lined up with what he had heard. And he said, I hope that's okay. I said, I don't mind a single bit. If I was you, if I was in your shoes, that's probably something I would do. It's not a bad idea just to double check what you're being heard. If, a couple people are telling you something, well, then that's good. I mean, that means there's not a guarantee, but there's an increased chance that someone steered you in the right direction. So that's been my experience, Gail.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is all the upfront work. We do a lot of upfront work when we're sitting there just determining whether or not we're going to take down a note or something. And that helps you structure the deal, doing the due diligence and doing a thorough due diligence and verifying everything from municipality violations, code violations, any liens that may be against the property. If there's a IRS lien, on how you go about putting that onto the borrower instead of the property itself. Lots of different things to look at. And one of the other things that I have found is you can't get enough education. You can't get enough knowledge in this business. There's a lot of things changing, not only the structure of the note business itself, but what's going on economically. We talked about the financial forecasts. And I looked on Amazon this morning. They have a fuzzy ball, but they don't have a crystal ball. So I don't know what's coming down the pike, but you can anticipate and just kind of look at what you can see happening is if the note business, if there's going to be more subprimes, they got a new word for it now. Do you remember what that is? Reprimes, pre-primes. Where they're going to be, if you have a pulse, you can get a loan, which is exactly what happened back to cause the last crisis in 2008. So you always got to be.
You would have learned.
You would have thought they would have learned. Good old people in DC, you got to love them.
Well, it's not all people in DC, but you do think just people in general, you'd think they would have learned.
Yeah, the powers that be in DC. Sorry, my bad. I used to travel to DC a lot when I would to work for NASA, but the knowledge, the learning, the constant learning. I take about 10% of my income and put it back into my education, and going to some of these seminars, and learning, networking, Can never get too much of that.
Yeah. And that ties in, with just what I was about to say here, Gail, and just basically reinforce exactly what she just said.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes for note investing, but also life. Really have a growth mindset, okay? Just what she said, always be learning. I strongly recommend the book Mindset. That's by Carol Dweck. And the whole point of this book is people that really thrive in life, they look at everything as a learning experience, and they're willing to kind of put themselves out there and fail. They use the example for, they looked at people, immigrants that were coming to this country some time ago, and they didn't speak English. And they were offered the chance to take a English speaking class so that they would be able to do better.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, the vast majority of the group that was offered this did not take the English speaking class. Wow. And the author, did the research, and they were kind of afraid of being exposed and afraid of, not being shown that they are smart. And versus that is something, that really would have greatly increased their chances of success if they had done something like that.
Right. So
the point is, just have a growth mindset and always be learning. And no one in this world knows everything. Even someone like Scott, yes, he knows a tremendous amount about note investing, but Scott is actually a good example of this. He goes to conferences. He's even told me, I like to go to conferences where I'm not the smartest guy there. He lives and breathes this, and that's something I do respect about him, and it's something I have really learned in my life. So moving on here, and that's closely related to that then, no one will fix your problems except for you, except for the person in the mirror. Even if you take training from someone, you still have to actually do the work. It's good to take someone's advice. It's good to act on it. But no one's going to care as much about your problems in life as you. And that's just, it's kind of an eye-opening thing. The only thing you can control in life is you. Mm-hmm. And for most people, that's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job.
Yeah.
Gail, that's my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, it is. You're responsible for your safety, your health, your well-being, and what you do. It falls back onto that mindset. If you want to succeed, sometimes you fail. And the worst thing that can happen is that you choose not to pick yourself back up and move on or learn from your mistakes. One of the besides Scott, I have a lot of respect for the man, because not only is he a caring individual, but he's caring about the people that he is mentoring, is Tony Robbins. I love Tony Robbins. I've been a big fan of audiobooks for a long time. I've turned my car into a classroom, if you will. And I'm always listening to different types of books, not always motivational books, but books on how to change how you think, because Gail Griesmer and I were talking about this the other day. Your mind can't make the difference or understand the difference between your reality. Your subconscious can't make the difference between reality and what's perceived. So if you live it and believe it and know it and feel it and live as if it's happening, it becomes a part of you, and you somehow manifest it. It's so cool.
Yeah. And right along those lines, then, we already talked quite a bit about due diligence. I don't think we need to revisit that right now. Mm-hmm. But one or two other things is don't expect things to be perfect, including you. Just about anybody, you have to struggle to succeed in the long run. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and accept that, I didn't do that perfectly. Even my Note Zone video, Gail, we talked about this when we were in Cape Coral.
I love the Note Zone.
I didn't do that perfectly. I really didn't. I did it pretty darn well, but I was personally aware of a couple really small ticks I had where I just missed my beat by just a little bit. And you know what? People didn't even notice.
No, I didn't.
The point is, don't expect things to be perfect, including yourself. anyway, I thought, I'm glad you remember that, Gail.
I think that, that's going to be one of those ones that live on in infamy. It's the way you did it, the way you pulled it off was absolutely brilliant. The fact that you did it live was even more amazing. But there's, it's like Eric with his Did You Knows, or Cody with his strolls. You got to love them. I wish, you guys, I hope to emulate you, with my Sunday noteworthy nuggets, but I'll get there eventually.
And then kind of the last thing is you want to know when to ask for help and be willing to act on advice.
Yes.
I had a very problematic property last year, and Wayne Snell was nice enough to talk with me about it. And I have only myself to blame. I didn't immediately execute his thoughts and recommendations, which he was nice enough to do. But then in the long run, that ended up being exactly what I had to do. And what can I say? I only have myself to blame. I really should have acted on that a little bit sooner. It didn't take a long time now, just a couple of months. But let's face it, time is money. And that's something that it would have helped my life to really act on a little bit earlier.
Now, why do you think you didn't act on it? If I could put you on the spot with that.
Oh, that's no problem. A negative attitude. And yes, that will sometimes shock people to hear me say that, because
shocking me. I
never try to show other people a negative attitude. Partly because people don't want to be around people with a negative attitude.
Right.
Do you want to hang out with Eeyore all day? I mean, he's a nice character on Winnie the Pooh and everything, but good grief, I've had, sometimes patients, they just drain the life out of you. And so anyway, I always try to have a really positive attitude, but I am just like anybody else. I'm human. It's hard to do that every single day. Mm-hmm. And I guess I just kind of convinced myself that, well, yeah, Wayne's a pretty smart guy, but he doesn't have this house and he doesn't have these problems. And he's probably had pretty darn similar problems. So it's easy to think that, you are different, your situation is different. Right. And that's why I didn't. I just, kind of had a negative attitude, and I was convinced that anything I was going to do wasn't going to work. So I didn't do anything. And this was in the past, guys. I kind of moved past this now, if you can't tell. And that's why I try to say that was a really impactful lesson. Mm-hmm. If you're going through, a bad place, keep going. Just stopping and sitting there is just going to keep you in a bad place. Trying to keep it clean here. Winston Churchill had a quote about that, I think. And so anyway, that was just a real impactful lesson I had for everybody, Gail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last one, Gail, this one will be a little bit of a surprise to you, is systems and habits are so important for people in life. And the funny thing is, I think I said this on one other presentation, so forgive me if I have repeated this. What a lot of people are hoping to get out of this, including myself. I mean, I already make a decent income, but I really want freedom. I really, it would be great if I didn't always have to ask off to take off to go somewhere, or it would be nice if I didn't have to work one weekend a month. These are kind of maybe, the quote, third world problems. It's not the end of the world, certainly, but it's not just part of how I design my perfect life. And no one's life is perfect. I do agree with that. But if you're willing to make changes in your life, you can try to get closer to your perfect life. And my point is, I got a little off subject there. You have to really develop really good systems and habits. And I saw this online and I kind of adapted it. You want to become a slave to your good habits and systems. And if you do that, that might actually lead to freedom. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you get in the habit of always returning phone calls, always going through tapes, always submitting offers, that is what is actually going to get you freedom in the end. And one other book along those lines that I've read is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And I have these books on my phone, actually. If people think that's a little odd, I'm holding up my phone. But that's just a really good book about that. And one of the things it talked about was the Indianapolis Colts football team when Tony Dungy was the coach. You know, one of the big things he kept doing is he kept trying to pound home habits. And that's just, I have found that very, very powerful. That's something I have been working on and will continue to really be putting a lot of stress and emphasis on in my life. So, Gail, I know that was one I just kind of sprang on you. I thought of it while we were speaking here, actually. So your thoughts on that?
Well, I read something the other day, or I heard something the other day that said a salary is just compensation for giving up on your dreams.
Yeah.
And, some people, I loved my job when I worked for NASA. And, when the space shuttle program ended and went into transition, it was much different. And just like you, I'm sure you get a lot of satisfaction from your job. There's nothing wrong with doing notes and having another, I don't want to say a sideline, but, it's a primary and then doing this too. But yeah, you're right. Becoming, people are generally creatures of habit. And it's just whether or not you develop the right habits or habits that don't serve your needs at that time, and then identifying them. And systems and processes and routines and everything are very vital to the success of this business or any business for that matter. I focus on my why. What is your why is something that somebody asked me one day, and I had to really ponder that and think about it. And of course, it comes back to family. And having the freedom to be able to, the financial freedom and comfort to be able to achieve what I want in life, not just goals. I'm not a very materialistic person. I'm all about experiences and doing things, traveling, doing that with my family. And I want to be able to do that. So I use, in this particular case, I'm using the note business to be able to satisfy a triple win, well, quadruple win. If you look at it, you've got the borrowers that have had a hard time. You have the banks that we're helping them with their bad debt. We have ourselves, and then we have our families and our futures, but also economy. We help the, economic. So it's a great strategy, and you're right. And it all comes back to what we do on a daily basis. And if we're doing the most important thing at that time to achieve our ultimate dreams and goals.
So that about wraps us up for today. Gail, I know you were monitoring Facebook. Are there any questions, any comments, anything that we want to address here?
Oh, boy. Yeah, you would think I was monitoring. I turned my it's really geeky. I have 3 monitors. I have one that I keep up for my analysis, and then one that I take the tape and feed it over, and then another one that I have for I don't want to get into that. But I'm looking right now, and
it's not geeky. I just rewatched The Martian. You got like mission control in your office there,
Well, when I went to 2 screens, and I always use 2 screens when I worked at Kennedy, my husband's like, "Oh my gosh, really?" Now he can't do without 2 screens. But we have, as you know, in this, when you get I'll sit there and have to look at my RPR, which is our realtor evaluation thing. And we look at a tape, you look at that. It's sometimes just the way my mind works. But I'm looking right now, and I'm not seeing any, but I'm sure. Yep, I found some notes or found some comments. Katie said she didn't mind helping us. Great. Thank you, Katie. We don't have any actual questions, but we actually have some pretty positive comments, which is very cool. So I'll let you look at those later too. But we don't have any questions. I think we're when you don't have questions, it's because you've covered the material so well, or you've bored people to death. So I'd like to think we covered it so well that we're.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening to.
Thank you for living, man. We love you.
Keep on doing that. I am pro living.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and thank you to Gail for joining me this morning. And then also, while she was in the background, thank you again to Katie Moten for her technical assistance. In between the 3 of us, we are very happy to have provided you a show today. And we've got just over 1 week left here of guest hosts. Scott should be back middle of next week. They are living the life out in Europe and seeing the sights. Hopefully you're following them. And that should do it for all of us. Thank you so much. That is how you climb the hill. And I will have my own special presentation about that here in the next week or two.
Hey, Bill,
about the origin of that. I will reveal that. I don't think I've ever told anyone the whole story except my wife. So, but I'm going to reveal that in a Facebook Live video. So thank you to everyone for listening, and I will see you on Friday.
Bill, before we sign off, let's give our contact information.
Okay, go ahead, Gail.
I'm Gail, Gail the Note Gal. I'm at www.gailthenotegal.com. Easy to remember. And you can reach me by phone or text 321-417-1142. My company is Noteworthy Investments.
And I'll put my phone number and email in the comments here. My phone number is 614-284-0071. I am 007 in terms of my phone number. I will never lose the phone number for that reason.
And it fits you well.
Well, I'm more of a, Aragorn type guy, from Lord of the Rings than really, James Bond. But hey, I'll take it where I can get it, right?
Right.
All right. Thank you again, everybody. And I'll put my email there. My email is a little bit harder. So we'll sign off here on that note again. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.